Residents of East Palestine, Ohio are still dealing with the effects of the Norfolk Southern derailment 2 weeks ago, and the company is trying to avoid speaking directly to them. This week, the town hosted an information meeting with residents to update them on the safety of their air and water and to hear what Norfolk Southern is doing to clean up the mess it caused. Company officials were invited to attend, but they refused to show up, claiming it was a safety risk to their employees, that there was some sort of threat posed by outside groups. Norfolk Southern, turn on your monitor. You're the only threat in town. Anyway, as crews continue to try to clean up that derailment and officials test the air and water quality, Norfolk Southern derailed another train on Thursday, this time in southeastern Michigan. It happened just outside Van Buren Township, and roughly 30 train cars skidded off the track. Reports are that no one was injured and that none of the derailed cars were carrying hazardous chemicals. Most were empty. There was one car that did contain liquid chlorine, but luckily, it stayed on the tracks. Cleanup crews and investigators are on the scene. If you're thinking, wow, it's pretty wild that Norfolk Southern has now put 2 trains on the ground in 2 weeks, you're right. It is pretty wild. What's even more wild is that freight rail companies crash trains more than 1,000 times a year on average. There have already been more than a dozen derailments in the U.S. this year, and looking at data from the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, there's been on average more than 1,700 train derailments each year between 1990 and 2021. And while some of these accidents are related to weather and freak track obstructions, the majority are caused by a lack of maintenance on the tracks as companies forego repairs to maximize profits and pay out investors. Faulty or missing cross ties were the single largest cause of derailments last year. Another big contributor was excessive speed, something that could be addressed through federal regulation. Of course, that would mean that Pete Buttigieg would have to do something as transportation secretary beyond just ignoring the warnings of rail workers and breaking their strike. Turning now to the occupied Palestinian territories, where the Israeli military continued its policy of collective punishment and blew up the family home of Mohammed al-Jabari. Last October, al-Jabari opened fire on Israeli settlers in the West Bank town of Hebron, killing one. He was also killed in the operation, which took place less than 100 meters from the home of far-right nationalist Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is now the Minister of Security of Israel and who has promised to accelerate the IDF's ethnic cleansing campaign against the Palestinians. Our correspondent over there, Mohammed Al-Safi, captured this footage of the al-Jabari home being blown up. He reported that 6 family members lived in the home and were forced to evacuate it. Security forces also removed individuals from nearby homes as explosive units placed charges in the building. Collective punishment of this sort is considered an international war crime. It's prohibited under the Geneva Conventions. It is, however, a popular policy among the bloodthirsty, be it in the Israeli government or here in the United States. You might remember back in 2015, while running for president, Donald Trump called on the U.S. to start taking out the family members of suspected Islamic State terrorists. And finally, in an address to the nation on Thursday, President Joe Biden admitted that the 3 objects shot down by F-22 fighters over the last week were most likely not Chinese surveillance crafts or surveillance crafts from any other nation. Take a look.
We don't yet know exactly what these 3 objects were, but nothing right now suggests they were related to China's spy balloon program or that they were surveillance vehicles from any other country. The intelligence community's current assessment is that these 3 objects were most likely balloons tied to private companies, recreation or research institutions studying weather or conducting other scientific research.
Oh, well, that's embarrassing. Biden claims that we still don't know what the objects were, but Aviation Week has a pretty good idea of what at least one of them was. It published a story on Thursday about a balloon hobby club in Illinois that fears it was one of their own crafts that was shot down. The Northern Illinois Bottle Cap Balloon Brigade occasionally launches what are called pico balloons, equipped with sensors and radio antennas that send updates on their location to ham radios. The balloons can travel around the world, and launching them has become a hobby for enthusiasts. Reading from the story now, quote, the club's silver coated party style Pico balloon reported its last position on February 10th at 38,910 feet
Okay.
off the west coast of Alaska. In a popular
Okay.
forecasting tool, the high split model, provided by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, projected the cylindrically shaped object would be floating high over the central part of the Yukon Territory on February 11th. That is the same day a Lockheed Martin F 22 shot down an unidentified object of a similar description and altitude in the same general area. Whoops. The report added, quote, the descriptions of all three unidentified objects shot down February 10th through 12th matches the shapes, altitudes, and payloads of the small Pico balloons, which can usually be purchased for $12 to $180 each, depending on the type. $12 to $180 each. So basically, the Pentagon spent over $1 million on missiles to shoot down some weather balloons and research equipment that likely costs, I don't know, like 100, $200. That's both really funny, but also kind of frightening. Doesn't exactly inspire confidence in the steadiness of the hand that's on the trigger.